I'm honored to interview my colleague, John Kingma, who by day is our president of commercial banking and chief product officer. But by night, he is one badass banker with a handgun and a long gun. Trust me, you want to watch this episode of PSL.
Hey folks, it's your friend John Rich. This is Mike Ring here. We heard too many stories about people getting canceled by their bank.
Does Old Glory Bank have a mission statement? Yes. It's called the Constitution.
The difference is you won't be canceled for who you are, and what you believe.
People need to have an institution that they can trust in.
Well, I like to say that I'm standing between the regulators and America, and I'm the only bank executive who is not intimidated by the regulators. From DEI, there's PSL, Privacy, Security, Liberty.
That's it.
Privacy, security, liberty.
I'm so honored to interview my friend and colleague, John Kingma. I can definitely tell you that Old Glory Bank only exists as it does today because of the brilliant hard work of John. For example, one of John's best words of advice for our young colleagues is, if you don't show up for work on Saturday, don't even bother coming in on Sunday. There's no banking hours at Old Glory Bank. And I can definitely tell you that John Kingma has done so many amazing things at Old Glory Bank only because God prepared him to meet this moment. So get ready to meet John Kingma. Hello, my brother. Thanks for being our first guest on PSL.
Well, thank you for having me.
So before we talk about your background, I want to explain why you are such a badass. No, it's not your boyish good looks, your full head of hair, or even the biceps. Some people at the company call you Johnny Biceps, not me, of course. It's because you have spent your adult life supporting the firearms industry and being an enthusiast. For any of you who doubt that this is real, here is a great video of John from a couple years ago.
Shooter.
Ahora, de Kentucky, Michigan. John Kingma.
For those of you who are not watching this, but just listening to it, what you saw was John going from target to target in a fast military-style move, doing a shotgun. I think that was a semi-automatic, definitely various handguns. And from what I could see, you were hitting all the targets. What was that, a training day? What was that?
It was actually it's for a 3-gun competition that I would compete in, try to compete in. I definitely learned from some great experts in the space.
So that day was both training and competition?
Some of that video is a combination of training, and then you take that skill set and go right into a competition. So what you didn't get to see on that video is a lot of missed shots. And
so some good editing, you're saying?
Yeah, maybe some good editing.
And I know a lot of bankers. I think you're probably one of the better firearm enthusiasts I've met as banking. So when did you first get introduced to firearms? Is it from your dad as a kid, growing up? When did it come together?
When I was a kid, I worked as what was called a brass rat, and I would pick up the shell casings at local competitions, and then so the empty brass, and then the company would then recycle those or reload those. So around at these firearm competitions, I got to shoot some of the great firearms that these competitors had. So at a young age, got to shoot some Thompson machine gun and a 50 cal machine gun, which was a great experience. But then, yeah.
How young was young?
I think that started, I was probably 10.
Wow, that is young.
Yeah.
Those were the good old days of Michigan.
Exactly. My dad got me into, he thought he was going to take me, I was bothering him to go deer hunting one time, and he bought me a lever action rifle. That was my first lever action rifle, and he thought he'd got me introduced to that. It was a way too big of a caliber. He was thinking he was buying me a 30-30 deer rifle, and he actually bought me it was a 4.44 caliber. I ended up with a almost a broken nose and bloody nose from that, not holding it onto it tight enough.
So I've been blessed to meet your family. John lives up in northern Michigan, Petoskey, which is God's country. In fact, we sometimes call him Johnny Petoskey. And I think you've taught your 3 kids firearms as well.
Yeah, my 3 kids have been introduced to firearms, and certainly making some firearm enthusiasts in our family.
What type of shooting do you normally do? And former military, definitely have some firearms for protection, but I'm certainly not an enthusiast. What is your favorite handgun? Are you long gun? What is it that you normally shoot?
Yeah, in the 3-gun competitions, what I try to focus on is the shotgun, rifle, and handgun. And what I found is that it's hard to compete in all 3 for me. I can be terrible at all 3, so I really focused in on the handgun. So that's where I became the most comfortable, is because I can get the most reps in the ranges.
So what does it mean that's just competition like? Is it an indoor range or an outdoor range?
So mostly outdoor ranges.
Where you are?
Yeah, where I am. There's some indoor ranges, but they're too far away or too small. Yeah, a lot of mostly outdoor ranges that we're shooting at.
So you just there'll be a planned competition, you just show up and you compete against someone, or you compete against yourself like in golf?
Yeah, great question. So both. So during practice days, you might coordinate with some other competitors, and you'll do training runs. You'll set up courses, and you'll do training runs around the competition. So it's like playing golf, right? You're out trying to outshoot each other. You're trying to outscore each other. So you get a little bit of a mini competition in there. But then there's a lot of dry fire practice that you can do, that I'll do in my garage. There's practice that I'll do solo, where I'll go to a range and set up a small course or practice a specific skill, like even just drawing and reloading.
And I don't want to date you or embarrass you, but are there age brackets that you get to take advantage of now that you're maybe over 40?
No, but I'll tell you what, the people that have been shooting for the longest, right? I would go to the competition when I first started. I was like, I'll outmove them. I'll move faster. They outshoot me every single time. So when you go to these competitions with the people that have been shooting for decades, they'll blow the doors off from you.
I gotta believe, I like to play golf, so I've got a few putters, a few drivers, and my wife's always rolling her eyes when I bring home a new golf club. Does the same thing happen in your house? Like, do you have lots of firearms that you bring home? And I don't know the space like you do, but is it possible you'd have 2, 3, 4 firearms?
Well, I lost all my firearms in a boating accident. There's a lot of water around here. You do end up with your favorites, right? You're the ones that you practice with the most, but you always have that upgrade where you see the latest and greatest and you want to go buy it, right? So there's been times where I've come home with new ones thinking I'm going to shoot better. At the end of the day, I don't shoot any better. It's my own skill set that I need to hone. And so the one handgun that everyone, if people are firearm people, they'll say, well, there's better competition guns, but this is the one that I was able to pick up, save for. I actually took me a while to save for it, but it's a
Well, I'll raise it a little higher. I can't see it.
Springfield. Wow. It's a Springfield DM 5 1/4, but the Springfield was geared towards this firearm when it came out, was geared towards competition. It has a longer slide, it has a lightened slide here, and this was one that I was able to save for, purchase. I literally had thousands and thousands of rounds to this handgun. So I've owned on paper better ones, more expensive ones. This is the one that I shoot the best because it feels to me, I have the most rounds through it. It feels like an extension of my hand.
When you show up at a competition, are a lot of people using that particular firearm, or is it everyone has their personal favorite?
No, like I said, this is older. There's many models better. There's many versions better. But for me, this one is the one that this is it. This is the tried and true one. I can tell you how many thousands and thousands of rounds I have through it. Shooting in sand pits, dropping the magazines, stepping on the magazines as you're running through, picking them up, they're full of sand, run it back in, you're shooting the gun all day long. This thing will sound like it is gritty as all get out. You feel the sand in it. When you pull the trigger, the sand's flying out of it. And I've literally washed this thing with water out of a hose and just oiled it up and back out. It has never misfired. So this is my tried and true. This is the one. You're
obviously able to, like you see on TV, you can put a blindfold on and you can take the thing apart and put it back together.
This one? Yeah, I could. This one for sure. Now the funny thing is this: when you're shooting competition, I end up Some people clean, they're really good about cleaning their firearms. That's what's great about this one. I rarely ever cleaned it, and it would be so chock full of sand where I felt bad even racking the slide. It sounded like sandpaper. But then I would go out and shoot it for, a couple hundred rounds through it for a competition, or take it to a practice round. And so you stack that competition or those practice rounds, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's been days and I've shot this thing in a row and without cleaning it, and weeks go by without cleaning it. So it's
I think you said it's a 9mm.
that is a 9mm. Yeah.
And what has been happening with the price of ammunition nowadays? Is it like I haven't bought much ammunition since COVID because I don't go through that much.
Yeah, it's fluctuated quite a bit. It's kind of stabilized now, but there are some, great opportunities out there to buy.
So we're going to talk about this later in the episode about what the states are doing to crack down and monitor people. But this is a perfect example of a real world. People always say, the hard left and elite say, why does someone need a couple hundred rounds of ammunition? Well, you're a perfect example. Like if you're on a weekend competition, how many rounds would you go through?
So an average competition, I could go through 150 to 200 rounds on a Saturday easily, and that doesn't include any practice. That is just the competitions. So there's been some weeks where I shoot 3 competitions. And then you try to get some practice in. You don't want to show up and not have the ammunition to shoot the rounds. It'd be like going and playing golf without golf balls.
Yeah, not have enough golf balls. Like, imagine if they tracked how many golf balls I put in the water. I would definitely be on a suspicious activity list. So here's an example. If you're actively doing a weekend or a 3-day shoot plus practice, you'd go through 500-600 rounds of ammunition. I would submit to you that the way the blue states are going, if you went out and bought 1,000 rounds of ammunition so you'd have a couple weeks worth, you'll end up on a list. And this is the problem with people who don't actually participate in firearm sports, writing laws to monitor people who buy ammunition. They ain't never going to track the number of balls I hit in a range, but they're going to track your ammunition. And I don't know how we got here as a country, but it's why we're going to talk about this later. This is why you've got a bank at Old Glory Bank, because we are never going to play that game. If the government reached out to us and said, send us a list of everyone who bought over 1,000 rounds of ammunition, we're going to tell them to pound sand. And even if they try to make me do it, I'm going to sit in jail before I give that data up. Are you with me on that?
We're not giving that.
Yeah, there you go. And if they come to your house, they better bring some help. So how did a badass like you become a boring banker? That's who I know as the boring banker side.
I was working out of school. I was working in big tech for a while, working with Fortune 500 companies, and I had an opportunity to come back to Northern Michigan and work in something that was a great space, body armor companies. I was able to bring my skills, my technology skills, and help that manufacturer produce and make body armor for law enforcement across the country and in military. And so what better way to see and have passion about what you do every day and fire you out of bed in the morning and keep you there late at night, knowing what you're doing is helping save lives. That was a great, great opportunity we had.
So you're a tech guy at a body armor company in Northern Michigan. You weren't taking the shots. You were the boring tech guy.
I wasn't taking the shots. There was there was individuals there that were actually testing the body armor, and so they put their lives at stake and tested the body armor themselves. I didn't have to test it.
And so you're there, your guys are having some success. You and I have talked about this, and we don't want to name the name of the company, but you all are having some success. I think you guys had contracts with the government, with military, plus with law enforcement. So how did this company just all of a sudden disappear?
Yeah, we had contracts with law enforcement and all, like, coast to coast. We had the majority of the states, and we also put body armor on the president and the vice president, and we put body armor on military. So we were definitely very successful in what we were doing. And like I said, the people were putting the inventor of the body armor, the owner of the company, was putting his own life on the hands of testing the body armor.
Do you folks know how many different lives the company you worked at saved?
I don't know the total number of lives that were saved, but I do know at one point when I was there, we had documented well over 1,000 lives saved. And most of those saves were done in the law enforcement space. And we started producing body armor for the U.S. Army, and I don't know how many more thousands of lives could have been saved.
I've never seen body armor up close. Like, so I think of like bulky vests that you see policemen wear, but is it like flexible like a coat? What is it like?
Can be both. Can be both. So the military ones can be very heavy, but there's lighter plates in them, and then you can get into some that are. So here's an example. This one has steel plates in it, very heavy, but take a big, stop a big round, and then you have some of them that are definitely smaller, more flexible body armor. That's you can wear it inside of a shirt and not know it's even there.
So if you're the president, that's what you would wear.
Yeah, they have all sorts of body armor, and sometimes we had some really interesting ones that were made into like outer coats, and so yeah, you wouldn't even know that it just looks like regular, and
Looks like the president's just carrying an extra couple pounds, not that he's wearing body
that's
armor.
right.
So you're in this company, you love it. In fact, I think you told me that even some of your family members were working there. And
Yeah.
then, you've told me the story before, but I'll let you tell it again here, that out of the blue, banks changed their appetite. Even though we're in the middle of a war, they changed their appetite and they cut off your line of credit.
Yeah, we speculate on the reasons, and there was a time where banks were trying to move away from manufacturing. We can speculate the intent of this move, but the intent of the result of it was.
Oh, we're not just speculating. I'm here to tell you, we know the space now. Banks were running away from the firearm space. And we're going to talk more about it, but it's real.
And the line of credit was pulled. And so the company was put in a position. We had orders we had purchase orders from law enforcement and military in the U.S. Army that we had workload for many, many months. But the company was put in a position of whether to make payroll or to buy product.
Because the line of credit was pulled.
Yeah, and you and I talk about this all the time. If you can't transact, you can't bank, you're out of business.
Yeah, that's what we say. If your personal bank account is canceled, it's inconvenient. If your business banking account is canceled, your business line of credit is canceled, you're out of business and you are Exhibit A. So this is a perfect example of a guy who just got pissed off at the banks and said, if I can't beat him, I'm going to join him. Is that how you got into banking?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, because 350 American jobs in that move were lost. Good paying manufacturing jobs with benefits were lost and never really to return. And so those communities were fragments of shells of what they used to be. It did upset me. As I've been watching the trend for years and years, because it wasn't just happening to the company I worked for, it was happening to small businesses all over. It was happening to manufacturers all over, where banks were beginning to be able to walk away from certain spaces. And the banks, there was fewer and fewer banks during this time. From the time I got into banking, there's half the number of banks there are today. So
yeah, it is crazy. I talked about it when I testified from the Senate, how many banks we've lost in the last 20 years. And just in the last 2 years, we lost 220 banks, only 8 started. It's not sustainable. So you got early 2000s, you're still pretty green. You've never been in a bank, and you get your first job at a bank in Upper Michigan, and you had the opportunity to bring a kind of an entrepreneurial mindset. You got with a good ownership group. You stayed there for 20 years, and you just stayed as a boring tech guy, or what'd you do there?
Yeah, no, what a great group. I did start and bring in critical infrastructure and work on refinement and cybersecurity, enhanced, stabilized, secured the environment, and got us ready for growth. And that's when I was able to put on my entrepreneurial hat and speak with the CEO there. And he allowed me the opportunity to grow inside of the business space as well. And so we put a digital tech stack on top of the traditional banking. How do we take traditional banking and modernize it? And they allowed and me an opportunity to throw a digital tech stack on and grow the bank, penetrate our existing markets with digital banking, capture more customers, but then extend our footprint without adding branches or costs or infrastructure. So we were able to really grow that FI through some different strategies. I started looking at how do we grow beyond just Michigan or the Midwest? How do we grow? How do we do this coast to coast? Because there's a huge need. The regular banks are continuing to shut down. The big banks are reducing the availability of financial services to small businesses. They're not thinking about everyday Americans. Financial lives of everyday Americans are becoming unhealthier. And then with the banks continuously compressing and walking away from the small business owner, it is really impacting the lifeblood of the American economy. So for me, that was a wake-up call. How do we do this on a bigger scale?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, how you had a life-changing event, literally a life-changing event, and that's how we were blessed to get you at Old Glory Bank. And I know you're pretty modest, and we don't want to name the name of the bank, but while you were there, you grew the bank 5x, I believe, right?
Yeah, the bank definitely grew 5 or 6x while I was there. There was a lot of great work by we had a great team, great strategies that were complementing each other. So the bank that it was a good time for the bank. But
Yeah, so it's 2025 now. You know, we like to say that we have one of the best online platforms, but you were doing this in the early 2000s, bringing digital banking, online banking. And so
yeah,
you were literally inventing this stuff early on.
it was definitely having a vision for taking the tech stack that exists today and how do we modernize traditional banking, right? And how to make banks not suck. How do they compete with fintechs? Because fintechs aren't providing those services.
Yeah, and I say this all the time with people who have come to Old Glory Bank. It's not an accident that God has brought us together. And really, God prepared you for what you're doing at Old Glory Bank from, first of all, having a passion from an early kid working in firearm space, being a competitive shooter now. You'd say not too competitive, but I'm pretty sure you're pretty good based on what I've seen. And then using your just technology background to get a job in banking, bringing technology to banking, being blessed to have an ownership group in your last job where you spent 20 years to do that, and then so blessed that you came with us with those skills. Anyone who thinks that God doesn't have plans for us, it's just because you're not letting go and believing. So let's talk about now the life-changing moment you had, and I'll just kind of set it up. 2022, it's past the worst days of COVID, but you almost died, not from COVID, but from the complications of COVID. And then you came out of that around the holidays of 2022 when we first met, and you were ready to have a life change.
I was coming back from a banking conference, and it was a fintech conference, and ended up with COVID. Got back home fairly sick, but I started to recover from it. But then I took a turn for the worse, and everything went downhill. I actually contracted a secondary infection that, unless it's caught quickly, it's extremely fatal in adults. And so what ended up happening is my throat closed down. I was unable to breathe or swallow for days. I had a huge fever of 103 plus, 104. That was coming out of that, understanding what happened with the specialists and those so many appointments I had afterwards.
And your daughter's in the industry, so you were relying. Yeah.
Yeah, thankfully that was I had that knowledge, that ability, because it was hard to get into with COVID, it was hard to get into the ER, and I wasn't able to speak for myself because my throat had closed down. So I had lost my voice, I was unable to breathe, unable to swallow, and so yeah, that was definitely nice to have an advocate with an inside perspective. The having meeting with the specialist afterwards, I understood that one of the specialists said, I couldn't believe that you made it, as you actually are here today, and that you made it, that you should have passed away before you got admitted. And it was getting access and trying to get admitted to the hospital was the problem, because they thought it was COVID. But they said I wouldn't have, it was like 5 o'clock in the evening, I was finally admitted, started getting treatment. They said I wouldn't have made it until the next morning.
Obviously, and God had a plan. And you survived that miraculous recovery. And this is the fall of 2022, late summer.
Yeah.
And going into Christmas, you have a conversation with your wife and say, you know what? This was a wake-up call. It's time to do something different and something big.
Yeah, leading into it, I've always talked about doing something bigger than what I was doing here at the community bank, and talked about that for a number of years. What does that next step look like? And so really, when you have a life event like that, you realize that you don't have time on your side. And so to continue to have that conversation another year, it was ready. My wife encouraged me to go ahead and take that next step, that leap of faith. And it was really coming into the holidays during that time that I had an opportunity to meet y'all.
We were launching retail banking. We were looking for someone, and we realized immediately from our customers reaching out to us that they wanted a business banking product. I literally went to the current team member who had just launched retail for us, and I said, his name is Chuck. I said, hey, Chuck, we got to do business banking. In my mind, not necessarily being a tech guy, just being a, hard-charging entrepreneur, I said, well, let's just launch business. How hard could it be? And he said, no, it's completely different architecture. It's just not a reskin. And Chuck said, if you ask me to do it, I'm seriously going to die. So we went looking for someone to do it who knew the technology we wanted to deploy. Simultaneously, God was speaking to you, and I think you were about to take a job in California, if my memory is right.
Yeah, everyone says they want to do something different. And then as you get into the business plan, they all are saying the same thing, right? And they are all becoming banks. And it wasn't until I met Old Glory Bank, met y'all, and you actually were talking about doing something different. And you were talking about everything that was my passion was to how do we bring better banking to everyday Americans that the big banks are forgotten about? How do we bring better banking to small businesses and allow them to compete and punch above their weight, which is not a focus of the big banks? And how do we do that on a stage, on a grand stage that really could affect and positively impact the lifeblood of the American economy? Well, enter Old Glory Bank that wanted to open a bank, go coast to coast, and be that. And so it was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, and I remember we talked first on the weekend. You were, I think, days away from accepting a different job.
Yeah.
And we reached out to you. I think you were about to accept Monday, Tuesday. We reached out to you on a Friday through a mutual friend who we had asked, actually one of our partners, one of our vendors, and we'd said, hey, we need someone to come in and build business banking. Do you know someone who may be available that understands small business and understands technology? And he says, I'm just the guy for you. And I think, Eric, my colleague, reached out to you, I think on a Friday, and we did our first conversation on Saturday. And I knew God had put us together right away. And it was such a blessing to meet you. And I think we were finishing each other's sentences by the time the meeting ended. And we are blessed that you are here. But I got to believe you, tough conversation to go to your wife and say, well, turns out I'm staying here and I'm going with the unknown bank called Old Glory Bank.
Yeah, well, we were finishing each other's sentences because we were so closely aligned on that passion and that mission. Y'all had a vision to do exactly what I was hoping to be able to do. So that was an easy conversation for my wife and I. She was very excited for me to have that opportunity. My biggest challenge was just coming out of that. I was still trying to finish a whole conversation with my voice. I was still trying to get my voice back. So it wasn't for several months yet from being sick just a few months earlier. It took me 6, 7. So even when I started at Old Glory Bank, I couldn't even finish a whole meeting without losing my voice.
And so we were blessed to bring you on, and I think we made a deal pretty quickly because it was obviously one of the great blessings we had for you to join us. And we said, listen, your job's going to be very simple. All you have to do is stand up a technology platform to be the best platform for small business across all 50 states. And in my mind, I'm like, John, what do you need? 30, 40 days? And I think you said to me, Ring, this is an 18-month integration to do this right. I'm like, no, that's for other folks, not for us. What can we really do it? And you said, well, listen, if I work 20 hours a day and get a couple team members, maybe we could do it in 6 months. So I said to you, we were talking in December, I said, well, you got till June 30th, I'll give you the full 6 months. You got to the end of June to stand up and open up an account with our new banking technology. And as a joke, and if you're not successful, you're going to be working in an oil rig in Oklahoma with me. And I think we had some fun with that. Like every meeting when we do an update, I think I showed some type of picture of you working in an oil rig with real Americans, which you would be fine as a badass working there. And somehow you were able to pull this off. And I think you sandbagged me a little bit because you did get it up and working, but I think the only account you opened was your own account. Then
Friends and family testing account.
Yeah, a couple friends and family. But then we did some testing, and then thankfully we got it launched at the end of summer, and since then we have been going gangbusters. So I think we really opened it up to the public past our existing friends and family, maybe August, September of 2023. And have we had some success in business banking?
We've had a bit of success. Yeah, we like our consumer banking. We found there's a huge demand for business banking. So that vision, that passion that we both share, bringing business banking to all 50 states, and being in that quadrant, we're focused on that small business client. We're focused on manufacturing. We're focused on the 2A space, crypto. Being in those spaces that the big banks aren't, that puts us in we're a 50-state bank that's focused on everyday Americans. So, yeah, we've had tremendous success.
We're up to 2,600 small business accounts. And what we've really focused on, and you've done amazing with a very small team doing this, what we like to focus on is we say, listen, your typical small business is too small for a big bank, and they're probably not going to get the right services from a small community bank, because a small community bank just doesn't have the millions of dollars it takes to have the right technology that you really need for online banking. So we've always said that we are the perfect 50-state small business bank, but plus we do the hard things, as you just said. We're not afraid of anything. So we are gladly and proudly in the 2A space, which is what today's about. We'll talk more about that in a second. But we've also done some things in crypto. We've got a little business happening now in cannabis. We are starting to build a program for online gaming. And so the big banks don't want to do the hard things. They just, and we do the hard things every day. So what I love to tell people is that you came in with this one little job, stand up the business banking platform and get that working. But then we put chief product officer on you. We put chief technical officer on you. We put CISO on you, the chief information security officer. And then now you run all of business banking as the president of commercial banking. So as your blessed colleague, I just want to say thank you for what you do. And we seriously would not be here but for you. So thank you.
Thank you for having the vision and the trust. It's been a pleasure.
So don't screw it up now. We got a lot to go. So I just want to remind folks that one of the reasons why Old Glory Bank exists is because we are standing up to the government, to folks who don't want you to have a bank account if you're in the Second Amendment Firearms 2A space. And everyone should remember what happened, started by the Obama administration in 2013 with Operation Choke Point 1.0, where they literally put pressure on the FDIC and the OCC and other regulators to rely on what's known as reputational risk, that if you're a bank that banks the 2A space, you're creating a reputational risk for your bank. We think just the opposite. You're creating reputational risk if you don't bank the 2A space. But that was a way for the Obama administration really to choke out, because they couldn't win in the public's mind. They couldn't obviously repeal the Second Amendment. They couldn't put in the laws they wanted. They got sneaky and immoral, and they just went and put pressure on the banks. So the big banks have basically abandoned the 2A space. And folks like you and I and the other great team members of Old Glory Bank say, bring it on. We'll take all the space. And I know this is, with your history and passion in the firearm space, not only as an enthusiast, but working at a body armor company, it was put out of business because of the banks. I know this is one of your great passions. And so I'm just going to remind people what you and I know. If you use PayPal, you cannot use it to buy ammunition, accessories, or firearms. It's right in their terms and conditions. If you live in a blue state, you need to start worrying about when you purchase products, because there's now 3 blue states more on the way that are doing things to restrict your ability through financial ways to stop you from buying the ammunition and firearms and accessories you want. Like, for example, in California, since July of 2024, credit card companies are required to have a merchant category code for stores who sell firearms. Now, an MCC code is a special 4-digit number that credit card companies put on certain stores, and that way it's very easy to see the volume done at those stores. And what this allows now the government to do is to reach out to the credit card companies and get a list of the activity and the purchases at those stores, because they're identified by an MCC, by a merchant category code. And this is one of the reasons why we always preach about Old Glory Pay. It's our version of PayPal, but yet it's closed loop. And we obviously will never submit to this request. We will never provide data to the state of California, I can assure you, about who is buying ammunition. So Colorado recently did something similar, but they now apply to both credit cards and banks, and they're required to monitor firearm purchases and report to law enforcement potentially dangerous firearms purchases. Now this, like I said, this is even more invasive than California's, that picks up banks. And I am 100% certain that this is unconstitutional. Remember, before I was a banker, been a lawyer for 30 years now, and this is not constitutional. And we, Old Glory Bank, have thousands of customers in Colorado, and I can assure you, we will never submit to this unconstitutional law, and we will not be providing to law enforcement your purchases. So use Old Glory Pay. New York is probably going to be the worst. They just signed the law, becomes effective in May 2025. Credit card companies also required to track firearm purchases and report to law enforcement unusual transactions, which no one can define, and what is unusual for an elite left politician versus unusual for a firearm enthusiast who actually does shooting. Of course, Old Glory Bank, who has lots of customers in New York, will never comply. So it is important that folks use Old Glory Pay to to purchase ammunition, accessories, and firearms. We're never going to have a merchant category code. We're never going to provide broad-based data to the government or monitor your purchases. So if you have a retail firearm store, whether online or in person, reach out to me or John. My email is mikering@oldglorybank.com. I get my own emails. John, I'll let you decide whether you want to give your email, but please reach out to us. And you can use Old Glory Pay, and it's closed loops. It takes 8 minutes to open an account. Our accounts are free. We have the best products and services, so why wouldn't you bank with Old Glory Bank? And that little bit of friction to have an account at Old Glory Bank will then allow you to use Old Glory Pay to purchase your firearms and ammunition and accessories without any fear. So, John, you've now been at the bank for 2 years. I believe we're fulfilling our mission of having the best banking services for online, business, and retail. But the 2A space, that's the week of the NRA National Show, is when we're dropping this episode. You're coming to Atlanta, actually, to be at the show, and we're going to be talking to people who love firearms. Let's talk about what we're doing at Old Glory Bank to support the 2A space. I know you've got a lot of plans to integrate into retail, their checkout. Tell me what's happening.
We have our own 2A division, right? So how many banks out there have a gun division, right? How many banks out there even want to say the word gun? So we have our own gun division.
One, Old Glory Bank.
Yeah, right. One, exactly. And you asked earlier if I've brought my kids into the shooting sports world. We have in our 2A division is my son, who is spearheading that division. So with the two of us and the great support of Old Glory Bank, we're providing not only banking services, but traditional deposit services. We are going out and having lending conversations, proactively love to lend in that space. So we're speaking to manufacturers in the firearm space that are come to us with the same stories about how their bank is asking them to leave or pull their line of credit. So they have concerns, and we're proactively going to them and asking them, hey, do you want a loan? Do you want a deposit account? So not many banks are even doing that.
Yeah, let me clarify that. So we have one of the fastest growing banks, I think, in history. Started with $10 million in deposits exactly 2 years ago. Our hair share, as we record today, a couple million short of 200, so call it 200. So we are actively lending, and we want to lend. We actually walk the walk. We want to lend in the 2A space. You know, an accessory, ammunition, retailer. If you're in the 2A space, reach out. Can we give your email on the show, John?
Yeah, it's
okay. So it's John at Old Glory. It's easy to remember. Mine's Mike Ring at oldglorybank.com. This is John at oldglorybank.com. Reach out to him, and he'll put you in the group. And we'd love to, in addition to being your banking, we'd love to earn your lending business. Yeah. So how are we helping people buy things?
So we have Old Glory Pay, like you talked about, and then that's a great closed loop system. Not only does it,
what does closed loop mean?
Yeah, closed loop, it means that we take the payment off the traditional rails of the monetary movement of like ACH or credit card or debit card. And everyone inside the ecosystem is an Old Glory Bank customer. So what the great thing about that is that your business and your consumer can send money to each other off those rails, and also that they can send money or receive money in seconds instead of days or hours, right? So purely from a business standpoint, closing that transaction loop or that feedback loop of when I can receive money, send money and receive money helps the cash flow and helps the cash position of our business customers. And then
we call it the settlement date. If you're PayPal or American Express, MasterCard, Visa, I think it could take 2, 3, 4 days to settle a merchant transaction if you're that store. With Old Glory Bank, you have your money in 7 seconds. It's as if someone gave you cash, and we think there's no one else who has that product offering. And as you said, when it's not on the payment rails, that means no merchant category code and no government snooping.
The fees are something else that we've been able to. A lot of times, retailers, manufacturers, they're being asked to take their e-commerce away. You know, sometimes they're asked to move e-commerce providers so they can accept credit card or debit card, but the fees that they're charged can be a lot higher. With Old Glory Pay, we can keep those fees down, take it off the rails, have your money faster, pay less for that service, and not have the risk of being asked to leave your bank. That should help you sleep at night.
Yeah, amen. And just to talk fees, I think it's all over the board, but I think your typical merchant processing fee, whether credit card or PayPal, it's probably 3 to 4%. We, as we grow this business, and our margins are much better because it's closed loop, we only charge 49 basis points, 0.5%. So as you just said, if you're a merchant and you take Old Glory Pay, you have your money in 7 seconds, not a couple days. You're not at risk of being canceled, and your fee is only 49 basis points, 0.5% versus 300 plus basis points. So I think we have something special here at Old Glory Bank with Old Glory Pay. And so folks know it's this one badass banker's product. And so if there's anything you need, he's your guy.
And we have a great week planned ahead. We're going to be at the NRA convention here, and please reach out if you have anything that you in 2A space, manufacturing space. If small business owner, please reach out to myself, John at oldglorybank.com, or one of our great business banking relationship managers.
Well, that's all I got for today. Thank you, Johnny Petoskey, one badass banker. Folks, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and follow. If you don't like it, please let me know why. I actually read my emails. It's MikeRing at oldglorybank.com. If you're not a customer of Old Glory Bank, I got to ask, what are you waiting for? It takes just 8 minutes to open an account. And if you like what we're doing, you want to support banks that support the 2A space, that push back against government overreach, that push back against debanking, please consider becoming an owner by going to own.oldglorybank.com. So God bless and PSL forever.